Today's networks are changing fast, and employees, devices, and infrastructures are more distributed than ever. Gigamon Threat Insight is a cloud-native, high-velocity network detection and response solution that's purpose-built to enable you to get in front of this transformation. Discover hidden network threats, automate security investigations, and optimize security workflows to stay a step ahead of attackers with Gigamon Threat Insight. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Gigamon. Do you worry about ransomware, data breaches, reputation damage, especially from phishing attacks, on employees working from home? The facts are, top cloud security tools have a 15% failure rate. 51% of phishing is social media based. Pixum knows because Pixum detects and stops breaches at point of click. Pixum's AI real-time solution detects actual fraud happening in a browser and stops it. Know your real security gaps. Get a phishing actualization test free at securityweekly.com/Pixum. That's PIXM. Here's Jacob. He's uploading documents to the cloud and chatting notes to his outside agency partners. This is Zoe. She's rushing to share the customer list with marketing and is sending the latest product roadmap to her mobile device. Which one of them is creating insider risk? They both are. Everyone creates insider risk, sometimes with malicious intent and sometimes just by doing their jobs. Empower productivity and protect your data with Code 42 Insider. Visit securityweekly.com/Code 42 to learn more. Welcome back, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly, where we are more than happy to announce that we will be at InfoSec World 2021 in person, October 25th through the 27th. This year, our annual partnership with InfoSec World is, of course, extra special as we're both business units under the Cyber Risk Alliance brand. What does that mean for Security Weekly listeners and InfoSec World attendees? You get to see and hear from many of the Security Weekly team at the event and save 20% off your World Pass. Visit securityweekly.com/ISW 2021 to register today using our discount code. Join us on June 10th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time for our technical training on insider risk to learn how to quickly mitigate data exposure risks. Then on June 24th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, learn how web application firewalls can help mitigate exposure in a complex threat landscape. Visit securityweekly.com/webcast to register today. Of course, if you missed any of our previous webcast or technical trainings, you can find them at securityweekly.com/on-demand. On to the news for this week. I think we start with FireEye, because I don't think we talked about FireEye yet.
You mean McRSAI?
McRSAI, because STG is RSA?
STG, I believe, is a PE firm that picked up. They first picked up RSA, I think, and then they picked up McAfee. I think I have that order right, and now FireEye. So that's under the same roof.
Yeah, you can't put them in that order. It definitely has to be Firsafee, because it sounds like a company. Firsafee, Firsafee.
I got insight into how RSA became a company in the book I'm currently listening to, Crypto by Steve Levy. It goes through the entire history of how the company was formed. They were broke as, like completely hanging on by a thread, because don't forget now, in the 80s, when they became a company, the NSA still wanted to control all of the crypto in the world. So they had to fight tooth and nail. They had a spat with Phil Zimmerman over the PGP, which was open sourced. They struggled to get customers because, who cared about crypto really in the 80s? And it was interesting how there's a whole backstory about how Diffie and Hellman worked at Stanford, and Stanford owned the patents to the Diffie-Hellman, and then let's see if I get it. Revest, Shamir, and Edelman. I always say Edelman wrong, I feel like. Is it Edelman? I think it's pronounced Edelman, right?
Yeah.
They worked at MIT, and MIT held their patents, but they needed both patents to put the RSA crypto system together, and there was all kinds of shuffling back and forth, and universities were involved, and ultimately RSA gained control of both sets of patents. It's pretty crazy. It's a crazy story to think about. Today, to think about, crypto's just everywhere. It's pretty interesting from the early days. It was a rough start for RSA.
I couldn't imagine having to fight that battle as a business. That had to be a nightmare. And then to deal with all the legal patents and you start to throw academia in there and forget it. It gets super tough.
Lotus Notes was their first. They had a product called MailSafe, and Lotus Notes was their first customer. Which then I remembered because I was a Lotus Notes developer. That Lotus was one of the only products at the time that could really do a great job of encrypting your email kind of behind the scenes, and they licensed that technology from RSA.
Interesting. Yeah, it's and then the regulation. Remember
the export laws.
Restrictions. Yeah. How crazy is that? Like this software.
They actually implemented it. Like if you bought the product because they wanted to sell to big companies.
That floppy disk is illegal.
Yeah, like big companies have international offices, so they had to write the code inside of Lotus Notes to go, well, like if you're sending email to someone outside the country, like you had two keys. You had like the 1024-bit key and the 56-bit key. Right. The 56-bit encryption technology could be exported, so my emails to them were, and they're like, it was a nightmare to code.
That actually that problem propagated into the early 90s and even the late 90s too. I remember a number of tools that we were working with that you had to actually say and declare within the tool which encryption level you were going to use for that exact reason.
Yep. So it's crazy now today. So RSA is owned by STG, and they just picked up FireEye's products, not Mandiant, right?
Yeah, no, Mandiant's valued a lot more than that, and it always has been. So FireEye picked them up, and it was actually late December 2013. I remember seeing the announcement on January 1st. Like, we weren't back to work yet, and I was an industry analyst, and I ended up writing up the rationale for that acquisition, the DA, we called it, the deal analysis, and yeah, it was Mandiant was acquired for 10x or over 10x, I think back then. It was just over $1 billion, not too different than the price that FireEye is getting sold for now, which is kind of painful to see, because the multiple here is about 1.64x, which for a software company, for a software products company, especially one that was hyped up as big as FireEye was in the middle of the last decade. It's a fire sale, I think, is an accurate description here.
Lots of other funding and acquisition announcements.
Oh, I should mention that some of their recent acquisitions are staying with Mandiant. So like the breach and attack simulation product, Veridin, that's staying on the Mandiant side. I believe their SOAR product, the CSG Infotas, is also staying on the Mandiant side. So it's mostly the malware analysis, threat detection, prevention type stuff that's moving in the FireEye portfolio. That
and they have an endpoint product too.
Yeah, and that's going. That's going with it. Yep.
Gotcha. Interesting.
HX. I don't know if they still call it HX. They used to call it HX.
Yeah, I haven't heard like glowing reviews.
No, and I think that's the problem is FireEye, like over the years, there was definitely some fake it till you make it, and I'm not sure they ever made it. I'm not sure they ever really put out a product that lit anybody on fire, got anybody really excited. I'm not sure they ever made a product anybody really wanted or needed. The way they started out, if you were familiar with FireEye in the early years, what we know them as now is like their third or fourth pivot. They were they were going after botnets at one point. They were a NAC vendor at one point in the late 2000s and pivoted away from that. But they were just ever in search for a good fit for this MVS technology, this patented technology that they had. And they ended up settling on this malware analysis sandbox.
Yeah, they had a bit of a shiny object syndrome for a while where they were chasing the latest and greatest marketing buzz terms to try to jam their product into it. And it just never really got.
That never happens.
It's never a good place to be in where you've got this technology that you're locked in on and you're forced to find a market for the technology. I mean, you really want to be working in the other direction, like find something people need, find a market need in a fit and then build the product. But that's what happened.
What else we got?
the ExtraHop acquisition is pretty big. If we want to just get
900 million.
Yeah, well, and it's pretty big in that it's both a big exit and not a big exit. So they've been talking about going IPO for a while, and all the numbers have been where they seemed like they needed to be. We never saw their S1. They never actually filed for IPO. We have seen some of these private equity exits where they retract the S1. Or even acquisitions, like Blue Coat, where they put out the S1 and like a week later, they announced the merger with Symantec. But yeah, in this case, 9X, the ARR is well over 100 million, I think, supposedly. We never saw the S1, so we don't actually know the details. But it seems kind of low, and it looks like financial analysts are kind of scratching their head, not quite sure without those details. Why it's going so much lower than everyone else seems to think it would be valued for.
I wonder if the you and I were talking about this a little bit in the pre-show, Adrian. The actual growth rate on ARR is a big piece of deciphering the multiple or deciphering the actual valuation. But I wonder if, because typically when folks like who picked them up, Bain Private Equity and Crosspoint Capital Partners split them. And when those guys get in play, it's usually because they can squeeze operational efficiencies out of it and then increase the revenue growth rate and the percentages, which will increase the multiple. So I wouldn't be surprised if the growth rate might be a little bit lower than we think it was, coupled with just some overhead efficiencies that can be squeezed out of it.
40%, they're saying. Second year of consecutive 40% growth in 2019, on pace to exceed 100 million ARR in 2020. And they're saying even if it slowed to 25%, this is kind of low. They're expecting at least 13x, something like that.
40% with the expectation of 100 this year puts them at 140 next year. Why would you ever exit that? That doesn't make sense. At that level of growth, you would take it at least another year and IPO it.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe the future will. Typically these types of PE deals. We find out more just 18 months, 2 years down the road. They can flip these pretty quickly. So, and sometimes they do some other buys and combine them.
Yeah.
Microsoft picked up ReFirm Labs. We've done an interview with ReFirm Labs, IoT security and firmware analysis, which I thought was an interesting direction for Microsoft to go security-wise. They've certainly can be a big player in the enterprise security realm more than in the IT security. IoT security is more product security, I think, than it is enterprise security. I mean, of course, enterprises have IoT products, but ReFirm Labs, I believe, is the firm that was like reverse engineering the firmware on an automated basis. And I think it speaks to Microsoft play in the IoT space, which, again, interesting direction for Microsoft to go in.
Yeah, I think at one point Microsoft's their operating systems were running like over 50% of the infotainment systems in cars. So, Microsoft has a lot going on with IoT. They've got their development boards even, along with Intel. They work with Intel on a lot of that stuff. But it's not clear to me if where they're going to position this. If this is for industrial IoT, if this is enterprise IoT stuff. Yeah, I'm not sure where this is going.
I'll chuck in a little blast from the past for you, Adrian. This sounds like BlackBerry with their move into, quote, cybersecurity and automotive play. I wonder if Microsoft wants to play in a similar kind of space. Now, the other thing to think about with this particular acquisition was ReFirm has, according to Crunchbase, $3.5 million invested capital. So it could have been just an acqui-hire of talent as well. It could have just been, hey, there's some really kick-ass people there, because to build what ReFirm was doing takes some pretty serious chops to automate reverse engineering of firmware. That's not a tiny little type of project. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is at least 50% acqui-hire.
Oh, so the authors of Binwalk, that's Craig Hafner. They're some of the top. We've interviewed them on the shows in the past. They're awesome people.
Yeah, some of the best of the best.
Not only like
guys.
Some of the nicest people you ever want to meet in the industry, but some of the best at reverse engineering firmware. I mean, they literally wrote the book. If there was a book, they would be the one. I don't think I ever published a book, but like their research is what I go to figure out when I want to reverse engineer firmware. And they created ReFirm Labs, so it doesn't, not surprising that if Microsoft wants the best and breed in that, to pick them up. Yeah,
and I might be wrong. I might be wrong on this, but I vaguely remember, I think it was Microsoft picking up Halvar Flake's company at 1.2.
Yep.
And it was almost 100% an acqui-hire. They just wanted the expertise in that team.
Yeah. Yeah, it's being integrated into what I think was Azure Sphere, and now you know why they're probably calling it Azure Defender for IoT, which is a similar architecture, what they say, securing from chip to cloud. Which, I mean, if I had to pick a sentence to describe what that is, it's security from chip to cloud.
It's a good story.
Yeah, this is actually a really good example of what a press release should read like.
Yeah.
Because, you scroll down a little bit, they've got a nice diagram.
Graphics, awesome, isn't it? How Microsoft's new acquisition will help customers. Yeah. That's what we want to know.
Exactly. So this is, check out the article if you want to see an excellent example of how to write a press release for an acquisition.
Mm-hmm. What else we got? You want to stay more on the acquisition and funding side?
Yeah, let's. There's only one more. It's Coalfire acquiring Denim Group. So go ahead and get that. And at least on mine, the rest are funding. I don't know if you have any other.
Synopsis acquired CodeDX. I didn't look into what CodeDX is.
Yep.
Yeah, provider of application security risk management solution that accelerates the discovery, prioritization, and remediation of software vulnerabilities. Well, that makes sense for Synopsis. I mean, they've got a full stack for, software security.
If I'm not mistaken, CodeDX is kind of in that same area. Ken is kind of in there. Vulcan's in there. Where they're both helping to do some of the prioritization and some of the remediation pieces of it.
That makes sense.
Speaking along that track too, though, the Brinka acquisition or the Brinka funding is kind of interesting too, around management of vulnerabilities and kind of prioritization. 110 million. That's pretty healthy.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one. It's in one of the Slacks I'm in. There was an interesting. There's some confusion, folks that weren't familiar with Brinka trying to figure out exactly what they're doing. And if you've ever seen a demo of the product, it's very much like if you really want to geek out on, risk analysis and stuff like that, it's a product for you. If Excel and Jupyter notebooks aren't quite doing it for you, and you need something more tailor-made, that already has some of the integrations for the data to get it in there. That's kind of what at least that's the impression I got. That's kind of what they built this product for. So
that comes on the back of the Kenna acquisition by Cisco. So there was a nice straight comp, I'm sure, on raising that money as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's we got all kinds of new comps, because that's I think that was the first one in that space. Kenna.
Yeah. Exabeam hits a $2.4 billion valuation. New unicorn. That's what they're saying. Which
Not surprising.
I thought that was interesting that it's a new unicorn, but it's 2.4 billion in valuation. So what, they were less than $1 billion, and then all of a sudden they were valued at 2.4 billion? That seems kind of weird to me.
Babies grow up fast.
Well, their May 7th, 2019 Series E was 75 million. So they may not have had a $1 billion valuation on that round. The next round,
I see. Right.
Was June 1 of 2021, just now, 200 million by Blue Owl. So yeah, it's probably a newly minted, yet they skipped right over the 1 billion number and went straight to 2.
Wow.
I mean, these VCs, I mean, they've been making a lot of money off these sales. So they're flush with cash. I mean, we're seeing it, like the funding for Wix is crazy. We're
Wix
seeing
got
another
round.
9-digit Series A's.
Is it Wiz?
Yeah,
Wiz.
Yeah. Wiz. No,
the funding.
Wix is different.
Yeah, Wix is very different. I'm definitely not investing there. But
Wiz might use Wix, but they're different.
The funding numbers are just really kind of out of control, and it's almost like security has returned so well over the last decade that a lot of these primarily security-focused and infrastructure-focused major VCs are just returning capital back into the game, hoping it comes back again.
Yeah, absolutely. And why wouldn't you, right?
Yeah.
Some product announcements. I thought this one was interesting. Thycotic Centrify is what they're calling it. That's like the new product name.
We discussed that, didn't we?
Did we talk about it? They had an announcement.
You might not have been here.
Did you talk about the integration with Cloud Vaults?
No, I don't think so.
So
we did talk about the name and how
you talked about the name already. Oh, so they have a new announcement based on the name, which is not really all that innovative, in my opinion. But they had announced enhancements to Thycotic Account Lifecycle Manager. It allows IT teams to govern cloud-based services with direct integrations to external vaults such as AWS, Azure, and service accounts used within the DevOps environment. I thought they would provide you with a vault, but now they're providing you the ability to manage other vaults in the cloud provider, which I thought was an interesting decision. That
it's a safer move.
Well, it's a decision many dev teams have to make, right? Or DevOps teams. Where does your secrets manager live? Do you use the one that's native in your cloud provider, or do you have your own that kind of ships alongside your application or however you're deploying it, or do you have a separate cloud instance of another product like Thycotic Centrify that manages all your vaults and keys, or do you have both? It sounds like larger enterprises with lots of applications, you might end up with both. I think that would be some management overhead, but of course tuned to the application as well. You've got different applications, different languages, frameworks, and requirements. Sometimes you might want to use AWS. Sometimes you might want to use Thycotic Centrify, which still sounds weird to say.
Yeah, it just rolls off the tongue, like Tyler was saying earlier about that RSA FireEye McAfee rename.
Yep.
But yeah, it's a choice you got to make as a vendor too. Like, do you really want to, make another one and then just get stepped on by the big public cloud organizations, right? Or, just make theirs easier to use? I remember the first time I saw an endpoint vendor, something that people were screaming for a while, like when Windows Defender started getting good and people started using it as an alternative to paying for Symantec or McAfee or some of those. One of the things people are really screaming for is, man, it'd be nice to have an enterprise console for managing Defender. And you saw some of the like next gen AV and EDR vendors putting that into their products and finding that need.
I think it's a similar case because in my experience,
yeah, that's why I mentioned it. Yeah,
it's pretty easy. It's easier to use a secrets manager or secrets manager functionality in a cloud provider than it is to get another product and bundle that with your application. And there's advantages, disadvantages, but I've always found in AWS, I can enable secrets manager, or there's like another few ways you can do it in depending on what your secret is, right, and what your application is. There's a few different ways to do it.
And if you think about it, is there any value in going external? Like, is there any discernible, like, way better value in using something that's not already built into the platform? Probably not. I don't think there's enough of a draw to pull you off of just using what's there.
In some cases, you're absolutely right. In other cases, there are requirements that may deem you use a different type of secrets manager. I know CyberArk's Conjure has like some awesome use cases. They made it way easier to manage secrets, like even further removing it from the application for better protection. I can see some people going down that route. We did an interview with them, I think, last year on that.
Without that specifically, they're in trouble. They need to have that to maintain value prop above what's already there.
Correct. It's an interesting aspect to application security that, as we know, gets overlooked because your secrets end up not being secrets anymore, and that's bad. Speaking of CyberArk, they had a huge announcement. I'm not quite sure what this additional functionality actually represents. They had a lot of language that was describing enhancements to their identity security platform, dynamic privilege access, so just-in-time access to hybrid cloud workloads, with Windows and Linux. Dynamic privilege access includes a full audit capabilities, which was kind of interesting. They've got something on web sessions and lifecycle management for privileged users. It sounded like stuff that CyberArk already did, and I'm not sure what the nuances were in some of the enhancements. I imagine if you're a CyberArk customer, you might look and say, oh, yeah, like I get an enhancement here or there. But as an outside, like looking in, I wasn't quite sure what the benefits were.
I can't help you on that one.
Tyler and Adrian are throwing up their hands. They don't know. It's totally fine. Panaseer issues cyber measurement guidance to protect enterprises from compromise. I do think this is in direct response to a lot of the ransomware style attacks that have been happening. And Panaseer is trying to come at it from an angle of, we're going to take all the security metrics that we can possibly catalog together and overlay that into your environment and try and give you one view so that you know how to prioritize and you can define and know what best practices are in your security metrics. I thought it was a really ambitious endeavor. So they say it's curated from a wide community of customers, experts, framework organizations such as NIST and CIS, and then provides recommendations to enable security teams to instantly improve their security metrics program via metric groupings. Kind of interesting.
Shoo, I don't know.
That's taken on a lot.
That sounds like a mess.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, granted, this is a data lake play, right? Like a security analytics big data lake play.
Yep.
Panaseer. And so just take all the data and then take
all the standards,
all the best practices and standards, and just, throw them into a big thing and mix it all together. And what's coming out of that?
Yeah.
Nothing concise.
Stir that witch's brew up. Just stir it up,
Boil that ocean, I guess.
Yeah, I mean that there's another potential what did he call it? Guided SaaS offering there. Mm-hmm. That needs to be guided SaaS.
Yes. Agreed.
I'm gonna need some guidance there.
Proofpoint is touting this as people-centric innovations, and their announcement says it combines DLP, insider threat management, CASB, zero trust network access, remote browser isolation, and cloud-native web security solutions.
Wow, more soup.
Hey,
more soup. More boiling of the ocean.
Yeah.
There's a lot. There's quite a few episodes that we could dive into each one of those things if we wanted to.
So are we ever going to get to the point as a security industry, as a vendor industry inside of security, to the point where security rolls up and that soup does not sound absolutely asinine to think about trying to boil? Like, is that ever going to happen? Because when we see that now, you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different technologies, 7 different point markets inside of security. And you're like, there's no way. Each of those is its own thing. I buy each of those separate. At some point, they will roll up. Like application security, if you take that as an industry, it used to be static analysis, dynamic analysis, SCA, IS, all the other different techs. Right. And now they're rolling up and you have 3 vendors. Will this, fast forward 50 years, will cybersecurity boil down to 3 major vendors that roll up the soup?
Some of the most secure companies I've ever pen tested pretty much had that. They were never huge companies. These tended to be mid-size, like 500 to 2,000 employee companies. And I would just be, they would just stick out because I'd be impressed. Like I couldn't do everything. They were noticed everything that I did. Even when I was trying to be sneaky, and I'd asked them, what does your stack look like? Like how do you have things set up behind a counter there? And oftentimes it would be like they would have one, very integrated. Typically at that size, it would be some kind of UTM play or something like that. But even back then, most of those UTMs had endpoint as well at that point. So they were getting, it was pre-cloud stuff. This we're seeing more data and cloud also going into some of those same buckets with email and everything else. But yeah, I think there's something there in that conversation we had earlier about knowing your products better, having less products, using more of those products and being more competent in using them. I think there is definitely a benefit there. So yeah, Tyler, that sounds totally doable. That sounds realistic to me.
I think you're going to end up with more than 3, because I think the size of the organization may dictate, some of the. I think it's easier to do on a smaller scale, and harder to do at 150,000 employees versus 10,000 or less.
And I think it's going to end up being the ones that do massive acquisitions, maybe the Palo Alto Networks approach, where it's like 10 years of billion-dollar acquisitions to roll up the soup and create the soup, right? And I think especially with cloud being, security is being reinvented. Every security market is being reinvented right now because of cloud native. And so when you roll that up, maybe that's even justification for the whiz. Never mind. No, it's not valuation. No,
but I mean, look at the trend we're seeing though. Who are the big 3 right now if we were to pick big 3? McAfee and Symantec are gone. It's not them. It's they tend to be the big software and infrastructure IT companies. So Cisco is becoming a big security hub. Microsoft is a big security company now. Palo Alto is a big security company now. And again, all that goes back to integration again. I think again, and it's not just on the technical side, but for the folks in procurement, it makes it easier to buy a product. When it's already been vetted, you've already done the due diligence on it, and you don't have, 20 startups providing, all these little tiny things. And I think we'll see some of those surveys where when we ask people how many security vendors you have, hopefully that steadily goes down in the future from 50 or 60 or whatever the average is.
I'm hoping so.
Yeah, I'm hoping in a certain size enterprise that, there's some top kind of soup, I guess, for lack of a better term, providers that handle most of your security stack. And then based on what's most important to the business and your people, process, and technology, you've got some other point vendors that you're integrating in. But largely, it's that big soup kind of, provider.
Man, I really wish I could continue to make fun of soup announcements, but now I can't. I ruined it for myself.
Soup is a thing now.
Soup's a thing.
Yep. What else do we have? Infoblox, speaking of more of the soup, it's interesting. You could almost separate the different types of soup, right, from your infrastructure security to your operational security, right? Like I look at the code and software you write and your infrastructure, like the base of your cloud provider, your DNS, and things of that nature. It's kind of more your infrastructure, right?
You're saying we have different flavors of soup, Paul?
We have different flavors. There's tomato soup, there's chicken soup, right?
Yep.
So you may have multiple soups. The way we actually started dividing it was, the IT security is handled by one group, and that's really your operational, like people have laptops. There are some servers that provide like base functionality so that people can send email. People have laptops, and that needs to be monitored and controlled and secured, right? And that for some companies, smaller ones, right, would outsource that. That's your MSSP that does that. What you're left with that they may not touch is what applications am I providing? So maybe my web infrastructure and my other applications that support the business. That's like infrastructure security, because that typically is going to be like my cloud provider I'm using, DNS, and my software security stack, my DevOps or SDLC. And that's a different suite of tools. Different suite.
Yep. Different buyers.
And different buyers potentially too.
So I guess I can make fun of soup again after all, because it doesn't sound like it can roll up.
Yep. Multiple soups.
Now that was one hell of a rat hole on the news today. What's the next topic?
That was certainly a rat hole. I didn't have much. I mean, product news has been pretty light since RSA. If you guys,
we didn't mention the upticks funding. They raised some money.
Good for them. That's fantastic.
I thought we talked about that one, but I'm always happy to talk about upticks, right?
Yeah, maybe we did last week, and that's a repeat. My memory of last week is hazy.
See, but that's an ingredient of the soup that I want.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is, right? When you think about what they're doing with, what is the technology that they...
EDR?
No, it's EDR, but they're using the Facebook thing. The
OS query.
OS query. Yeah. Like what they did with that was just, it's amazing.
Super smart to leverage that open source freeware stack that was getting rapid adoption to build your business on top of. Makes total sense.
Yeah, I think that's a smart endpoint. I mean, you're going to enter into the, it's some aspect of it is endpoint, and what I think Ganesh really tries to position as a differentiator is it's also cloud too, right? Because you can basically collect telemetry from anything with OS query, and if you've got the engine like Upticks provides, you can make sense of that. And I think that's a huge part of your soup.
Yeah, and I forget who it was that brought it to Mac, but it's been kind of a community effort. Like right around when Upticks was starting to form. It was originally, I want to say, Windows only. And then it was brought to Mac. Somebody added those bits in, and somebody added Linux, and Upticks has added quite a bit of their own flavor to it as well.
That's good
flavor.
There you go. We're just continuing with the soup analogy.
That's just going to be the theme for today.
Yeah, I do.
Did you have soup for lunch?
Too bad you've already eaten, Tyler.
True.
Because now I bet you're craving soup. But you're craving soup.
No. Not in the least. Nope.
Well, outstanding. That is the news soup for this week. Thanks everyone for listening and watching. Actually, we've got a pre-recorded interview coming up next. 2 of them from RSA Conference 2021. Stay tuned.